big items that the General Assembly has supported over the last many years, and especially the three of you have been very engaged in these initiatives. But I want to first start by telling you that it's been a real, true honor for me to serve as the interim chancellor of the Virginia Community College system. I've been in this role for 7 months. I'll continue until April the 1st when our new chancellor arrives. And a lot of people want to meet him. Well, he is in Richmond. So I want to encourage the three of you, if you can, to come to our legislative reception tonight at the Jefferson Hotel, where you will get to meet Dr. Doré and welcome him to Virginia. Oh, I wish you could come. I understand. What do I point at, Wendy?
Hopefully it should be that. Hold on, let me double. I didn't check yet.
Well, what? No. No. I want to give you some updates on, thank you, on the Workforce Credentials Grant Program, Get a Skill, Get a Job, Get Ahead, the G3 program that we started last year, Transfer Virginia, talk a little bit about our enrollment trends, and then talk about our big initiative for this year, which is Hire Virginia. But I want to, especially thank you for supporting those three big initiatives that have made such a difference in the lives of Virginians, starting with Workforce Credentials, which we launched in 2017 with a $4 million annual budget. We're up to $13.5 million now. We spent all of that $13.5 million last year, by the way. So looking for an increase in that budget. These are our non-credit workforce training programs that lead to industry-recognized credentials. We call this Fast Forward, so you may hear, you've probably heard us use that name for it. The program's grown incredibly quickly. Over 40,000 people enrolled over the past 5 years, over 32,000 credentials earned. The Commonwealth has invested $55 million, and you can see the return on investment, $2.6 billion in wages earned by Fast Forward completers. The next signature program is G3. I'll be glad to take questions now, if that's okay with you, Madam Chair.
You should have put me on a retainer today. I was one of the speakers at the Chamber of Commerce was having their annual meeting, and one of the first points out of my mouth was the Virginia Community College in the Hire Virginia program
Cool.
as being a job stimulator, and three of your supporters had done an op-ed in the Richmond Times-Dispatch recently.
Yeah.
Yes, I know.
Yes.
And actually, I was using that as the basis of it, and so hopefully it's well received. But one of the things I commented on was about the migration, and you got 72% stay in Virginia. Is there any particular discipline that you are finding in particular are migrating out of Virginia, or they are, in fact, when they enroll, they're not Virginians?
Senator Norman, I do not know the answer to that, but I'll find out and let you know. That's a good question. Thank you. G3, Get a Skill, Get a Job, Get Ahead. Of course, that's our last dollar tuition and fees program that provides last dollar support for low-income and middle-income Virginians to enroll in high-demand credit CTE programs. So all your healthcare programs, manufacturing, skilled trades, public safety, computer technologies, and the other one is early childhood education. Yeah.
The kids that are participating in that, on average, what percentage of their tuition, roughly, did the state want to pay?
So you can see from this pie chart, since it is last dollar, we use federal Pell first, and then we use state financial aid second. So G3 was only 36% of the total amount spent. So the total amount spent on their tuition and fees was $41 million. And G3 paid just over a third of that.
And what did the kids want?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Yeah.
So they
Yep.
were able to do the
Yep.
two-year program for free.
That's correct. Right. Yeah, they got the first year of a 2-year program for free. We're in our second year right now of the program. The next slide just shows you some numbers, some outcomes, how many students enrolled in 2021, how much money in G3 tuition they received. Great outcomes, and the program is growing every year. Then the third program that I want to thank you for your support of is Senator Donovan didn't really call it Transfer Virginia, but in 2018, she sponsored a bill that required the universities and community colleges to work together to smooth out the transfer process. We gave it a name. We called it Transfer Virginia. And so what has happened is we now have guaranteed transfer courses for students. We now have a credential called a passport, another credential called a Uniform Certificate of General Education that every university will accept when the student goes there. And the picture that you see here is our transfer portal that we built in collaboration with the universities. And it contains all of the information parents, students, advisors, and counselors need to know about transfer all in one place. So it provides great transparency, and it also shows the students their pathway to a baccalaureate degree at a particular university. So that's going great, and I appreciate your support of that bill. The next slide shows you our enrollment headcount by program area and by college for the year 21-22. I know it's small and hard to read, but what I wanted you to see on this chart is that we've combined, this is a combined head count. So we have the credit students on the left-hand side in the first 5 columns, and then the non-credit students in the right-hand side. So in total, in 2021, 2022, the Virginia Community College System served over 210,000 students. So about 10,000 of them were in the non-credit programs in the Fast Forward program, and about 199,000 in our credit programs. So that's significantly lower than where we were a decade ago. You know that our enrollment has been declining. However, I am happy to report to you that in the fall of 2022, compared to the fall of 2021, we were up just a little bit. So I think things are beginning to stabilize in terms of community college enrollment. And then Higher Virginia, Senator Norman, thank you for that great introduction. We have in Virginia, the thing we hear about most often as one of the big problems in Virginia that we need to work with our businesses and industries and figure out a way to resolve it is our workforce issue. We do not have enough workers for the vacant jobs. We've heard the governor use the number of 300,000 vacant jobs. That was last fall. He was quoting that number. We hired a research firm to look at that for us and say, how does that break down? How many of those 300,000 jobs require a bachelor's degree? How many require just high school? And how many require something in between? So what they came back with is that in January, this month, there were 291,000 unfilled jobs in Virginia. And of those, about 33% or 1/3 are middle skill jobs, the ones that require something beyond high school, but they don't require a bachelor's degree. And these researchers went further to say that over the next 3 years, that job demand will grow to about 470,000. I find that number hard to believe, but 470,000 middle skill jobs that will have to be trained for in Virginia. Why? Because of growth, because of the Infrastructure Act funds that will be coming into Virginia. So those are all middle skilled jobs to middle skilled workers to do those jobs. But also retirements. We're reaching a baby boom retirement moment in our workforce in America, and that's going to really hit us significantly over the next 3 to 5 years. So,
One of the things that surprised me out of your op-ed was nobody was
Anyway, one of the things that surprised me in your op-ed was that on these middle skill jobs, that of the individuals that were qualified and eligible to work, that only 64% were employed in Virginia.
yep, our that's called labor force participation rate, 64%, right? So we have a lot of people who could be working who are not, and that I think that's, you know, how can we draw them in? How can we get them into our community colleges, get them trained, get them skilled, and get them jobs?
with another hat on. I asked myself that question.
I understand. So Higher Virginia is the program or the plan that we've put together to address the jobs need. And what we want to do with Higher Virginia is not create a new program per se, but leverage our existing programs that are already being so successful. So G3, Fast Forward, they're very, very successful programs. Let's do more of it. Let's make it bigger. So what does that look like? We are asking for a $250 million investment. Those are big dollars. That's a big ask. But when we sat down and started looking at what do the colleges need, you know, remember we have 23 community colleges. So if you divide $250 million by 23 community colleges, it's not that much. But when I asked the presidents what do they need, they all echoed the same kinds of things. They want more money for Fast Forward because they need to increase enrollment in Fast Forward. They need funding for dual enroll students so that they can take college academy classes on the college campus that are CTE focused, and Tidewater does a lot of this kind of training already. They need modern labs and classrooms and equipment. They need advisors. Thank you, Senator Saslaw, again, for carrying that bill for us. They need people who can provide career services and link students to internships and apprenticeships. And finally, they said we need some kind of a marketing strategy to get the word out so that those people who are eligible to be in the workforce who are not working can learn about what the opportunities are for them at Virginia's community colleges. We're very grateful that Governor Youngkin, in his budget amendments, he invested about $21 million in some of the components of Higher Virginia. And now we're asking the General Assembly to consider funding the rest so that we can make a significant difference in addressing this workforce crisis.
Yes, ma'am. Somewhere I recall that there was a suggestion that if you could get that $250 million that you thought within maybe a 3-year period you could crank out 75,000
75,000.
jobs.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really,
It's a
people like me on this side of the table, that product is really important.
And it's a big lift. And it's one, Senator Norman, we can't do it without the resources. But we stand ready, and the incoming chancellor has been briefed on this, and he knows what he's walking into, and he is a workforce guy. So this is right down his alley. So he will give this his fullest support when he arrives in Virginia. I want to point this out to you as well, that some people have said, well, don't y'all have enough money to do this already? And the answer is no, we don't. Yeah, we get 57 cents on the dollar for every dollar spent on per student at the 4-year colleges. So there's a great disparity between how the community colleges are funded and how the universities are funded. And we're also at the bottom third of per student expenditures when we are compared with peer community colleges in other states, including North Carolina. So even North Carolina does a better job of funding community colleges than Virginia does. But back to Higher Virginia, this is the return on investment, Senator Norman. 75,000 middle skill workers trained and placed over the next 3 years. This addresses the needs of Blueprint Virginia. It helps underserved residents with job training and placement. It provides businesses and industries with access to a well-trained and qualified workforce, and it stimulates billions of dollars in economic activity for the Commonwealth. So thank you for letting me be here today to give you the brief update on what we've been up to for the last few years with G3 and Fast Forward and Transfer Virginia, and then to share with you where we hope to go with Higher Virginia.
I have a question,
So
Madam
much.
Chair.
Senator Edwards.
We have record low unemployment, everybody knows. In the last 6 months, we have not had any inflation either, I'm advised. But also, it's remarkable that almost 300,000 unfilled jobs as of January, 291,000. That tells me that we don't have enough people who qualify for lack of education. Is that correct?
I think
Or train, use the word training, whatever you want to use.
right. I think you're absolutely correct that there are people who are not working who could be working if they could get short-term training and get a credential and go to work. Mm-hmm. And we hear their success stories all the time. Like recently, we went up to Northern Virginia and had a couple of legislative sessions with their legislative delegation, and they had students there telling their stories, and it's really powerful. We had one at Tidewater as well. It's really powerful when you hear a young man. Young man at Tidewater just almost made me cry. He stood up and he said, "I was a barista. That's what I did. I was making coffee and serving it to people. I was a barista." And I heard about welding at Tidewater Community College, and 6 weeks later, I had a job. I was earning benefits. I was making good money. And now he's going on, I had a credential, and now he's going on to get another credential. He said he's going to go back to the college and teach as well. He's not giving up his day job, but he's going to teach for the college on the weekends. So those are the kinds of stories that we hear from people who are either underemployed or unemployed who come into these programs.
I had a client come, I've told the story several times now, several years ago. Nice young lady in her 20s, mid-20s, and she graduated from Patrick Kennedy High School, did very well. So I said, "Where did you go to college?" "Oh, I didn't go to college. I didn't want the debt." Oh. So she, I think, joined Amazon. They sent her to Harvard for selected programs.
Right.
That's what big businesses are saying. We'll take somebody who's capable,
right,
and then we'll train them.
But what we're putting on the table here would mean that she could have come to a community college and graduated without debt. I'm glad she went to Harvard, though. That's right.
About Harvard, but anyway, I went to Princeton. But anyway,
All right. Thank you so much.
The problem is in what we're doing, what Virginia Western is doing, if the local businesses are putting in money for a foundation. So if you graduate from the public schools in the Roanoke Valley, you can go to Virginia Western for free.
That's right. That's right. Okay.
All right, Peter, you're up.
Madam Chair, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. April and Wendy, good to see you. I won't trespass on your time too much, but Wendy asked me to talk about a couple of things coming out of recent SHEV activities, so I'll talk about our budget recommendations very briefly, and then just a couple of matters on which we've been working over the last year or so, and then touch on some of the issues that you've already addressed around enrollment, for instance, and the transfer initiative. On the financial front, just a quick thank you for what you did last year, this unprecedented investment in both operating and capital, $1 billion in operating, almost $1 billion in capital. You'll see on this slide the huge increase in the second year for need-based financial aid, which would not have been possible without the Senate's leadership, so we're grateful for your effort on that. The small increase in E&G programs, I won't say small, but the increase in E&G programs between first year and second year is due primarily to the 5% salary increase. On the next page, you'll see that Chev, when we got together, worked with our council, we acknowledged the large investment that you'd already made in the biennium, and so we came in with a smaller ask, and in fact what we're trying to do is just round out some of the edges on what you did last year. And so we looked at things like salary increases. You may recall that you split funded the salary increases, the 5%, which means that the institutions still need to draw on their own resources, primarily tuition and fees, in order to pay for their share of the salary increase. That's about $101 million. You've talked about inflationary increases, so within non-personal services, we did an across-the-system estimate of what that would be. We have operation and maintenance of new buildings that you've authorized that now have opened, and so we've put that on there. And then there's a military survivor tuition waiver program that has exceeded its growth expectation. And so every time that someone takes advantage of a tuition waiver, that passes the cost on to another student or onto the institution to deal with in some fashion. So we've laid these out and essentially called them unavoidable cost increases, and they totaled up to $177 million. Of course, that funding, if it comes at all, doesn't need to come entirely from the general fund. And so on the next page, we lay out a couple of options where you could split fund this using traditional fund splits that you have in place. And so you see that would lower the cost from the general fund to $45 million, for example. And then there are a few other options. And of course, there's the option of ongoing institutional savings, which we can anticipate, but I can say with small tuition increases over the last several years that options that the institutions have become fewer and fewer. As I said, the council's recommendations were mostly kind of cleaning up around the edges in recognition of the large investment that you made last year. But we also know that there are other state areas of interest and priority. And of course, we don't know how much money you have. So we said, if you have more money, be sympathetic to requests that might come forward to you in these areas. And so we've outlined a number of them. These are initiatives, priorities that we've heard from our council, my board, from you, from the legislature, as well as from the governor's office and from institutions, and we've compiled a summary of them here. I'm running through this in the interest of time. Before I go on, I'm going to start talking about some student issues and some of our initiatives, and I'll just pause there, Madam Chair, in case anyone had any questions on our budget priorities.
Madam Chairman, not a question on your bullet point on need-based aid and financial aid award supplication. I put in a budget amendment for another $100 million because I'm hoping to tweak a couple of four-year universities that are building financial aid into their tuition.
I look forward to seeing that amendment, Senator, and giving you some feedback. So thank you. I mean, in fact, I've long said that to the extent possible, we should spread need-based financial aid among 8.5 million people instead of however many people are enrolled at any particular institution.
Well, you know as well as I do, Madam Chairman, that the General Assembly has really not kept its share of responsibility on that because we dropped from maybe 8,000 down to 4, over a period of time. You all have that graph that
Yes.
reflects the decline in the state's contribution over it, and something needs to be done. So I look forward to your wisdom.
Okay. Madam Chair, thank you. Moving along, just a couple of topics I'll touch on. We released a report in November called What Matters Most, and this is particularly aimed at student success. and picks up on many of the themes that you've been hearing from the institutions and across the nation, really, on what it takes for students to be successful today. And we boiled it down into these 4 broad categories around preparedness, belonging, well-being, and then basic needs. And so if you've not seen this report, I'd be happy to share it with you. It's on our website, and it contains a number of different options that you might want to consider as you're addressing ways to make sure that more students have greater opportunities to succeed.
How did you determine these 4?
This was a distillation of all the input that we did, all the research we did, the input that we got from students, as well as from institutional leaders, what we picked up in the professional journals on the topic. Kind of a thorough analysis of the environment, and came back and distilled the recommendations into these categories. Dr. Morrissey has already talked about Transfer Virginia, and I'll just confirm everything she said, that this is an exciting initiative, and we appreciate the legislature's interest in transfer, particularly over the last several years, and getting this moving is going to make a big difference. I'll point out, in the realm of affordability, we do a calculation at Chev, or Wendy used to do a calculation of how much a student potentially could save if they did their first 2 years at a community college, and that number is up to about $20,000 in just tuition. It has nothing to do with room and board, but if you start at a community college for 2 years, get your associate degree, and then transfer, you will save about $20,000 over the cost of that total degree. So this is an initiative that we believe really can drive a lot of cost savings, give more students more opportunities. This slide, the next one, just shows what the goals are. We have this Transfer Virginia work group meets quarterly. Make sure that they're continuing to make improvements on the website, on agreements between the 2-year and the 4-year institutions that are maybe program specific in many cases. These are some of the kinds of goals that Transfer Virginia has laid out for the next year. And I'll note that if you get an associate degree, transfer to a university, your chances of graduating are higher than they would be if you started at a university and went through for 4 years. So there are lots of benefits. Let me just mention enrollment. I know at your retreat you had a presentation from the Weldon Cooper Center on enrollments. This is a topic that the council has addressed and has been interested in a number of times. We have done some comparisons between pre-COVID, post-COVID. Overall, statewide, public-private, 4-year, 2-year, we're down by about 4.5% in our enrollment. And so we've also noticed, Senator Norman, you mentioned something about the labor market participation rate, or Dr. Morrissey did. Higher education participation rate is also down. So it was at about 72% 10 years ago. It's down to about 65% now. So they're not working, they're not going to school. I'm not quite sure where they are, but we believe that in order to meet our higher education goals and your goals for an educated Virginia, that we should be up probably somewhere around 75% participation. We never thought 72% was sufficient. I'll note that that number does not take into account some of the non-credit programs that people are involved in, so it's just the credit side. What would be a salary for an average, maybe 3 years out or starting? I don't know. It's
4 years.
let's say, I would have to get back to you with an exact number, and it varies by whether you're an engineer or a philosopher.
Or art history.
Or art history, yeah. So an engineer is probably going to make between 60 and 80. 80, 60 and 80,000 a year, I would think. But anthropology major might be closer to 25. Yeah, it matters almost more the program of study than the institution you attend. So I'll just throw that out. Anyway, there's the enrollment things. 2 things coming up over this.
That's why I went to law school. I was an English history major.
Couldn't get a job otherwise.
There are 2 activities in which your staff will be involved this summer. One deals with the enrollment projections. We do this every 2 years, where we look at the institution's enrollment projections. Chev has the authority to approve or disapprove enrollment projections. And so we will be going through that process collaboratively with the institutions and with your staff over the summer. This is also the year where we do the full-blown 6-year plan process with the institutions, with the group that we call OP6, and April, of course, ably represents the Senate on that group. We meet with every institution. It is quite the experience. Finally, enrollment, of course, leads to degrees. So I wanted to give you an update on where we are with degrees awarded. We reached a record. So enrollment's down, but we're still, colleges, universities are still conferring more degrees. So we had a record number of degrees this year at our public-private 4-year, 2-year institutions of 127,000, higher than last year's record. So I don't know how long that will sustain, but we're continuing to add to the state's economy in a material way to the tune of 127,000 people with a higher credential than we did the year before. This does not include the Workforce Credential Grant Program that Sharon mentioned, the Fast Forward program. Last year, a little over 6,000 students received a credential in that program, and we'll be releasing this year's report next month. This all adds up to the statewide strategic plan for higher education that we call Pathways to Opportunity. We believe that we need to be more equitable, more affordable, and more transformative. And as we are, we will become the best state for education. We set a benchmark around that we believe that we need to have 70% of our working age population to have some credential beyond high school, to be a workforce credential, an associate degree, a bachelor's degree, but something beyond high school. We are kind of on track, but on the last page you'll see that the attainment rate that we measure, this is the measure that we use, and we use the Lumina Foundation of the national organization to help us do this calculation. But we have grown about 0.9 percentage point over the previous year. We believe we need to be at about a 1.2% growth over the next 8 or so years in order to reach our goal. So all of the things that preceded, everything I talked about, the budget investments, the things that we're trying to do to help students not only enroll but also be successful, lead towards this 70% attainment goal by 2030. So, Madam Chair, that's my quick summary. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Senator Normant.
Peter, you know, one of the tears that I've been on for a couple of years is the growth of some of the student enrollment growth of some of our four-year institutions. We do know graphically as we look at the college trend, and I continue to be concerned not about the Virginia Techs, the William & Marys, AUVA. I say A, I don't use the University of Virginia. They are a University of Virginia. But I continue to be concerned about the Mary Washingtons, the Radfords, the Longwoods on it as we allow growth in the student populations on those that have market power. Is SHEV monitoring that, or do you have any strategy that you're working on to try to insulate those other schools against the declining population and the increasing student population in those schools?
Yeah. Madam Chair, thank you. Senator Norman, this very much is something that's front and center with the council right now. We had a major item on it at our January meeting. We're developing a work group to come back to you with a set of recommendations that we believe could help address some of these questions that you have raised. I'll also point out that I mentioned that we do have the enrollment projection process that will go on this year. So we will have an opportunity to sit just with Mary Washington and Radford, but also some of the institutions that you just mentioned.
Thank you, Peter.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity.
Okay. We'll now hear from Heather McKay.
Madam Chair, City Managers, thank you so much for having me today. I'm very excited for the opportunity to give you an update on the Virginia Office of Education Economics, so appreciate the invitation. So the Virginia Office of Education Economics, as you all know, possibly is, as the Office of Labor Market Alignment, which is what it's called in legislation, was created out of a call from SHEV, stakeholders, and others for a need to really have an independent source of research and data on workforce and education alignment. And so that's what we're really focused on at VOE. We seek to serve stakeholders across the Commonwealth, including policymakers like yourselves, employers, institutions, partner agencies, and students and families. So we really have quite a broad mandate, and we're excited to move forward with that mission. We have been in place since 2021 when this office was put into legislation, but we were staffed. The research director, Todd Oldham, and I came to Virginia in October of 2021. So we've been in operation for about a year and a half, and what I'm going to tell you about today is our activity up to this point, and we're excited to continue to move forward with work. One of the major efforts that we've been working on at VOE over the last year and a half is a supply-demand dashboard, and some of the questions that this committee has put forward today will find some answers on this dashboard, and so I'm excited at the prospect of it coming forward. This dashboard will be completed this winter. We hope to release it by the end of February this year. And it will answer, it's based on a number of research questions and will answer a variety of different topics and issues around supply and demand. So the dashboard will be a place where you can go to take a look at what's happening in the whole state, or you can take a look at what's happening in terms of supply demand by regionality. We'll have different regionalities that you can select, like Go Virginia, or local workforce development area, or even legislative district. So lots of ways that one could divide Virginia. And then we'll be answering questions like how many jobs are being posted in a certain industry or occupational area, and also how many degrees and where are those degrees coming from. So this data will all be available in different levels of specificity for those who are interested. In addition, we'll be taking a look at wages and progression over time, and also focusing a lot on skills and the different kinds of skills required for each job and occupation, and how a transference could happen between one job or another with extra training or education. And so we're excited to launch this. I hope the next time I am able to speak to you all, I'll be able to show you this dashboard. The next activity that we're working on is the Virginia Skills Initiative, and this we used some WIOA funding, thanks to Secretary Slater, to move forward with this initiative. And what we hope to do is to fill some holes in data that we have in terms of education and workforce alignment in Virginia. So at the moment, the data sets that we have don't tell us what a graduate's occupation is. So we're hoping to begin to fill some holes in that through this effort. We also don't know where a student is if they're not in Virginia. Where are they working? Are they in Washington, D.C., in a neighboring state, or have they moved someplace else? So we're hoping to gather that information, as well as what skills they're talking about and non-degree credentials. We are collecting information from social media profiles on 2 million graduates and non-completers, and we should have that data set in hand by January. That data set the information will be added to our dashboard, but we also hope to put out reports and briefs to provide information out to the Commonwealth on what we've learned from this data collection. So we're really hoping to better understand what folks who major in different things, like we just talked about when Peter was here, what they're doing, the kinds of jobs that they have, and the progression of those jobs through time. So we're excited about the potential of that data set. In addition to that, we're also creating a skills data set on programs in Virginia. This data set will document the competencies and skills learned in different educational programs. So we used anthropology as an example, collect the competencies and skills anthropology majors are learning, so that we can begin to equate that to labor market demand and need. And we'll do that through looking at those competencies and skills, and also looking at job postings data and other information that we have available, and start to make some connections there. So we're excited about the prospect of this and what that could mean for the Commonwealth moving forward. We have a couple of other initiatives that I'll just briefly mention given time, but I'd be happy to speak to any of you about them further as we move forward. One is our STEM workforce profile. This emerged out of the last General Assembly session, and we were really excited at this opportunity to take a look at what is STEM in Virginia. We worked closely with the Governor's STEM Workforce Council STEM Advisory Council, and looked at what are STEM jobs in Virginia right now and what they were prior to this report. 72 occupations, those occupations that you think of with a lab coat, right? Those typical STEM occupations. But there are lots and lots of occupations that require STEM skills that were not in this list, and important areas. So one was related jobs, which would be managerial jobs, sales jobs, other kinds of jobs that require STEM but may not be directly thought of as a STEM career. So we began to track that STEM knowledge that folks need for those jobs. And the other, and I think most important, is really the skilled technical workforce and the requirement that those folks have to begin to use STEM skills in their jobs every day as things become automated and that work changes over time. And so we've increased that list from 72 to 342 and presented that report to you all. So happy to take any questions or to walk anybody through that, but we're very excited about that opportunity. So thank you. We were also asked by you all in the last General Assembly session to take a look at G3 and take a look at the labor market alignment. And so we did that with the help of a work group, which was a very helpful group to us to talk through what was on G3, how G3 got created, and to begin to think of ways to look at the labor market alignment. So that report is currently in internal review process still, but should be coming to you all soon. And I'd be happy to walk anyone through those findings anytime. We were also asked to review the registered apprenticeships in Virginia, and we have done that using the federal RAPIDS data, which is the data that's reported to the USDOL, and we have created a report to document the number of apprenticeships and the progression of those apprenticeships in Virginia. And we think this is hopefully pretty helpful to create a picture of what apprenticeship looks like and to think about next steps. That is also currently in internal review, but we hope to have that to you all soon. And finally, we're working with the Virginia Department of Education and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, to take a look at career readiness preparation in K-12 so that we can begin to make some policy and practice recommendations there. So the OECD is coming to Virginia in March to take a look at what happens in our K-12 schools, and they're also putting 2 surveys out to students in Virginia and also former students in Virginia. And those results, we should have them by summer to help inform policy and practice as we move forward. So that's a brief picture of what we've been up to in the last year and a half. There's more to talk about, and I'd be happy to talk further with anybody who'd like to dig into this a little bit.
The last one you talked about, the career navigation of Virginia's K through 12 system.
Yes.
Exactly what is it that you are trying to find out?
What we're trying to find out is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development is really the leader internationally on career readiness research and what works in terms of students being able to get good jobs after high school. And so what we're trying to assess is what's already happening here in Virginia, how do students feel about the experience and career readiness that they're getting, and what can we learn from other countries and other states about what might be good practice here in Virginia. And so the idea is really to pull together the status and then make some recommendations for the future about possible policy and practice next steps.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
sorry I missed it.
Oh, no.
When you start evaluating and comparing various training programs, are you going to have third-party validation that they actually are accomplishing what they're supposed to? So either a certification standard set by.
So the data that we have available to us to begin to look at training programs is really 2 kinds of data. And there's a lot of missingness in this data. So we have data on anything that is reported to SHEV. So degree programs reported to SHEV, we have information on. For any non-degree programs or training programs, the data available to us is when it is funded in some way by the state. So think of the Workforce Credential Grant and G3. There's a tremendous amount of other training that we don't have data on. So that's my sort of first answer to the question is we can only look at the training where data is available. And I think one of the roles that we can play is beginning to talk about where we have holes, right, and creating some awareness around those holes for data so that the Commonwealth could begin to think about, is there anything to move forward with to improve our data systems? In terms of sort of ranking or rating programs, I think what we've been doing so far is taking a look at that labor market alignment piece and beginning to look at the number of graduates and the number of jobs available and those kinds of things. The non-degree credential piece, I think, is a nice next step on that, which is, I think, what you're referring to. Our alumni profile work will begin to show us what non-degree credentials people have and align them to jobs, but there is very little data on that issue at the moment available.
Say that that's important, that what we're teaching is of value, not just getting a piece of paper saying it's okay, but somebody has verified that that's a worthwhile piece of paper.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you. We appreciate your time.
Yes.
Yes, John.
You said there's enough state funding to cover dual enrollment, high school students taking community college courses. Why then do the community college then pay the local schools? For if there's enough state funding to cover dual enrollment, why do the community colleges then pay the local schools?
I think that might be a question Mr. Blake is better.
I read this somewhere. You have enough state funding to cover dual enrollment, right? Is that the community college? Is that correct? I think keep reading this. There's enough state funding to cover dual enrollment. Am I right?
I don't represent the community college. I'm sorry,
That's
sir.
not her area.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I apologize.
That's all right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it. Okay, Wendy, you're up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll make this very brief because I know many of you heard the presentation this morning that also provided an overview for higher education. As noted this morning, this first slide is really more of a recap, and Peter already mentioned too.
Which slide are we talking about?
So
Higher ed.
yeah, so tab 4.
Tab 4.
Number 2.
2. Yeah,
All right,
more at the
okay.
beginning of the book.
Right order. Okay.
As Peter mentioned, there's a significant investment that's already in the state budget. We have here 852. His number was a little bit larger because that is capturing that last bullet here where there's the investment of the state share of the salary increases. But as he noted, significant investments in operations, undergraduate financial aid, our 2 HBCUs, the Pell Initiative, the tuition assistance grant, as well as some research dollars as well. In terms of the proposed amendments, there's a 445.8 that's direct to the institutions. The community college system has 15 million and, about 21 million. There's 15 million for 5 pilot industry credentials to have those located in high schools. And the second one is for career placement centers. Dr. Morrissey mentioned a little bit of support that's needed there in her presentation. And the last is the promotion of the G3 and the Fast Forward programs that you heard about earlier. The next item is the Eastern Virginia Medical School merger with ODU, and I do have a slide that provides a little more details on that. This next one is funding to SHEV to support mental health, and Peter provided a little bit in that presentation of what matters most, and this $9 million is targeted towards, one, establishing more of a statewide contract for mental health services and looking into things like telehealth, but it does apply to both secondary and post-secondary, the $9 million, and that is one-time funding. You'll see here some funding for the Massey Cancer Center.
Good. It's been interesting to me that how some of the public colleges and universities are expanding their delivery of services, usually in a partnership with healthcare services on campus, and then add on to the cost. $9 million, what is it intended to do, and is it going to have the potential to result in additional cover mental health services, particularly in those colleges that are now starting to charge for health care.
I'll make an attempt on on a couple parts of that. I think one of the things we've heard is that there has been increased mental health needs, both in K-12 and post-secondary, that have grown or been exacerbated as part of the pandemic. So I think some of the funds is really to look at that, and we've definitely heard from institutions regarding increased cases of mental health needs. Regarding what's been provided here, I think to better address that increased demand, there was interest to be able to have not just the services on campus, but maybe through remote health to be able to address that. And sometimes, from what I've heard, it's a little bit different than the specific mental health needing to have something that's waiting to get an appointment that could take 2 to 3 weeks. This is something that they can access very quickly and have access to. I can't speak again for how that may impact tuition and fees and where that may be, but that's something we can look into. In the table here, you also see some funding for the UVA-Wise to explore research status and also to expand the Center for Teaching Excellence. I mentioned the ODU-EVMS merger, and there's several components to that, and we've provided a quick summary regarding that. There's $10 million set aside to support one-time costs associated with the planning and integration, but prior to moving into that phase, there is a requirement to have a report this year in August to meet 5 deliverables, and those are listed here. And then once there's written approval that's provided by the governor and the chairs of the House Appropriations, Senate Finance, and Appropriations Committee, ODU and EVMS shall complete the merger by July 1 of 2024.
When do they envision that being completed?
Well, the language uses the word to complete the merger, but I think we need to get more. And I do want to note that the Madam Secretary, Secretary Goodere, is joining us next week and might be able to answer it. But to complete, but we might need to get more clarification from the institutions if that's more of complete the authorization for the merger versus how that would begin.
Have they, or could you find out if they've explored the possibility of also including that merger, Centera Hospital? And the reason I say that is because
Including Centera? Including Centera how?
Pardon?
Including Centera how?
As essentially hooking up with part of the school and maybe providing part of the financing. I say this because that's a situation that you have with Johns Hopkins. I mean, they not only have that in the medical school, they also have the research hospital, or the hospital that's
I know there's
developed
been
that.
discussions with Centera.
Huh?
There have been discussions with Centera.
I will second that.
Yeah.
Okay.
They have been.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense.
Centera also provides some internships or residency situations, and there are discussions surrounding how that compensation offset that type of thing. But I have another question. I realize that there are going to be expenses that are going to be necessary to accomplish this merger in a transition. My concern is, has there been any projected thought on whether or not there would be a sustainability cost from the General Assembly of Virginia? And I know a little bit about this. This is not the first school that's been approached about taking on EVMS. But I can't help but remember what went on out in Radford. And you may recall that we accepted responsibility for picking up, I think, the Carillion Nursing School, and that was supposed to be a positive economic factor. And I don't think that those projections have panned out. And what I do know, the enthusiasm that was projected to the General Assembly by the then president of Radford now is also the president of ODU. And I don't say that disparagingly. I just want
some comfort that we are not going to be in an ongoing subsidization beyond what is a reasonable transition period. Can you give me that assurance?
I can say no to that. I feel pretty comfortable saying that, sir. But I will note that there are 3 bullets. The third bullet listed is that they do need to provide a funding plan, and actually within the wording, I've shortened it here, that a breakout of the types of funding too. So I think that'll be all items that are required before there is a written approval provided by the chairs. So
every major medical school that's been very successful has affiliated with a major hospital. I mean, you got the Peterborough Brigham with Harvard, you got the one at UVA, the one at Stanford, one was, I mean, all of these schools.
Roanoke?
Huh? But I mean, but we got to do it. If that medical school is going to progress, they really need to be affiliated, A, with the university, and B, with a hospital.
You gotta have patients to work on it too.
Oh, they'll have them. They don't have any shortage of them in Boston or Johns Hopkins.
But there is communication with Centera. There is conversation with Centera.
I believe there will be ongoing discussions, and again, there's a lot of wording here in terms of gatekeeping before an approval is made. Last, I do want to point out a few other areas. In central accounts, there's additional $5 million for the Innovative Internship Program, and that's to expand paid and credit-bearing student internships. There's also the bonuses that you heard applicable to state employees. Those will also be provided to faculty and staff. There's a few adjustments to credit card rebates based on actual instance earnings, and also the Tech Talent Investment Program to align with current allocations. I also want to point out that in the Department of Housing and Community Development, the Virginia Innovative Initiative for Growth and Opportunity, so the Go Virginia, has some funds that are both, there's a pot that's directed towards 4 regions that have very specific wording that are related to higher education programs. And then there's also $20 million for a competitive grant process. I've listed the language here to note how these would be aligned potentially with higher education in terms of requirements for business education, collaborations, align education and training for work-based learning, and providing students with the opportunity for full-time employment. I also want to mention that there is money that was outlined today by Mike with Department of Health that are targeted towards the nursing initiative and healthcare, and some additional loan programs, as well as some initiatives to increase the nursing pipeline that also could be impacting higher education as well.
I've never thought about this before, but you've got that adjusted credit card rebates. Does each individual higher education institution, do they try to negotiate credit card preferences and rates to hold back the swipe cost?
I'll let April do the comments for that.
So, and higher ed institutions can correct me if they're wrong, but Madam Chair, Senator Norman. What is in the back in central appropriations is an estimate that the administration typically does that estimates how much interest is going to be earned in those funds that they're holding, and also what the credit card rebate would be. And so that's just an estimation. I think the pot of money that we're talking about here, and the institutions are entitled to those things as part of performance measures and a part of restructuring. So that's how that came to be. So that gets updated, but the issue I think with this past funding is at some point it didn't get updated, and everyone didn't receive the amounts that they were in what I would say entitled to, and so it's being reverted back from a prior year. If anybody else has other information, please correct me, but that's the way that Planning and Budget has explained it to us. So.
Last, we're going to point out that there's some additional language that's been added to alternative financing approval requirements. This is more in the area of capital, and when it's aligned with public-private partnerships, we've included some of the language here. There's also some requirements for standardized financial reporting, asking SHEV to collect data that's not recorded in the state central reporting system. This is related to some state and local funds. Additional language for VCU's health system and the separate officers to serve in the role of the Vice President for Health Services and the Chief Executive Officer, and language changes for the Workforce Credential Grant Program, changing the maximum reimbursement from $3,000 to $4,000. It seems that you also got a reprint of that last table, but it's just a print of page 3, so ignore that. But that concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any additional questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions to Wendy? Okay, well,
All
thank
right.
you.
Well, thank you.
So what do we have to look forward to next week?
Next week will be
Member amendments.
next
No,
week.
that's later.
Yeah. We'll be talking more about financial aid and receiving some updates and initiatives related to that. So
Yes, we will.
you'll be hearing from Peter and a few others again.
Okay, great. Well, that exhausts our agenda for today. So thank you all very much for coming and listen so attentively. So, thank you.